What happens when you put LeBron James, D Wade, and Chris Bosh all on one team during their primes? You get one of the most iconic teams in NBA history. The Miami Heat Big Three era is easily one of the most memorable moments in NBA history, a time where a team dominated the Eastern Conference, made it to the finals 4 consecutive seasons, and ended up with 2 titles. A team that would have enough success along with talent that many people would argue that they are one of the best teams in NBA history, along with the fact that they all gave us moments in the NBA Finals that no one will ever forget anytime soon. And even with all of these moments and achievements and the players that were on the roster, this is a team that had an impact in the NBA that lasted longer than their time together. A team that quite frankly changed the NBA. However, in my opinion, due to the simple fact that you had star players such as LeBron and D Wade, many people go overlooked on how much they changed the NBA and never really received the right credit for their contributions. But in today's video, we will change all of that as I shed light on 2 people who changed the NBA during the Big Three Miami Heat era. What's up YouTube, it's the one and only Legend of Winning, aka Low, and like I said in my intro, in today's video what we will be doing is talking about how impactful, trailblazing, groundbreaking the Big Three were in Miami in their time of dominance in the NBA. And this is not a knock on LeBron because he's a phenomenal player. However, I believe many people tend to undermine and belittle the type of impact that certain players and coaches and quite frankly just all around people around LeBron will have in his career simply due to his greatness. But in today's video that no longer will stand because I will be highlighting 2 people who significantly aided the process in changing the NBA that people don't talk about. However, before we get to that part of the video, we must discuss how the NBA was before the Big Three got together in Miami. Because before the Big Three in Miami formed and got together, the NBA was still played in a more traditional sense. If you look at some of the better teams from 2008, 9, 10, and even 2011 when they actually formed, the NBA still had traditional point guard, shooting guard, small forward roles with your 2 big men in the power forward and center positions that were operating closer to the basket, and everyone was still operating with the mentality of getting as close as they can to the rim to score the basketball. And for the most part, you may have 1 or 2 3-point shooters on the perimeter, but quite frankly, if you look during that time, there really weren't that many players who were spacing out the floor. And so with that in mind, please make sure you understand when the Miami Heat originally formed in 2010, even though yes, Chris Bosh, D Wade, and LeBron were phenomenal players at that time, and many people, including myself, would claim that those are 3 of the top 15 players that were all on the same team, many people had a lot of concerns for multiple reasons. Obviously, you have both LeBron and D Wade who are ball handlers, and that might have been a problem, but easily the biggest concern, or at least one of the biggest concerns with that team, was a lack of spacing. LeBron nor D Wade really shot threes that well, and Chris Bosh, even though yes he had a face-up game, he was more of a post-up player. And then you add on top of the fact that really no one on the Miami Heat were fluent 3-point shooters, that became a significant problem that they faced immediately in the 2011 NBA Finals.
We had like 6, 7 different types of matchups in our zone, right? And we played man-to-man, and we had a variety of different switches, right? So we knew that 90% of his shots were going to come from the left-hand side, right? We knew that if you gave him room from the left, he was going to drive.
And so with a face full of embarrassment from D Wade, LeBron, and Chris Bosh as he literally cried off the court, it was very obvious that the Miami Heat needed to make significant changes. But however, the reason why they were able to switch it up and the biggest breakthrough with this team is when Chris Bosh suffered an injury in the postseason, which forced Erik Spoelstra to try different lineups. The massive shift in their lineup came in the second round of the 2012 playoffs as the Miami Heat faced the up-and-coming Indiana Pacers team. Quickly in Game 1, Chris Bosh would go down with an injury that would keep him sidelined for the remainder of the series, which put the Miami Heat in a very peculiar situation. In Game 2, Erik Spoelstra just ran another traditional lineup. However, in Games 3 and 4, not only was Shane Battier thrusted in the starting lineup, but you started to see a lot more small ball lineups ran pretty consistently consistently from the Miami Heat. And then by the end of the series, we started to see a lot more minutes being given to a player such as Mike Miller, rather than again running a traditional lineup with players such as Joel Anthony, Udonis Haslem, or Rodney Turov. And I have no idea why Erik Spoelstra is not credited enough for his adjustments that he was forced to make due to an injury to one of his major contributors in Chris Bosh. Now, as we all know, fast forward into the NBA Finals, the Miami Heat matched up with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Miami Heat came out victorious in 5 games. And even though, again, I want to be extremely clear here, Chris Bosh and Shane Battier, they were not making 3-pointers at the same rate that they are in today's league. The threat of them being on the perimeter and spacing out the floor was more than enough to utilize them and force the opponent to switch up their defensive schemes, which is something that the Oklahoma City Thunder were forced to do, as Shane Battier was a consistent 3-point shooter throughout that entire series, or at least he was consistent for that time period when it comes to knocking down the 3-ball, as he ended that series as only an 11 to 12 point scorer. However, his shooting splits were amazing, shooting 61% from the field and 57, almost 58% from behind the arc, making 3 3-pointers on a game-to-game basis. That level of spacing became very vital for the Miami Heat, as we all know, moving forward. Fast forward to the 2013 season, and this lineup between Shane Battier, Chris Bosh, and LeBron in the front court became something that we were all familiar with. And you can make an argument that the 2013 season is when the Miami Heat were at their apex. They went on their historic run, they eventually made it to the finals again, and I think probably the biggest aspect of the Miami Heat that many people overlook is how good they were defensively. And this is the second part of how they changed the NBA, in which many people fail to understand. The greatest part about Chris Bosh, Shane Battier, LeBron James, and all the other forwards that they were able to run out there to run a small ball lineup, not only were they great 3-point shooters, or at least they were great for that time and how they space out the floor, but they were also extremely flexible and versatile on the defensive end. And the reason why it threw so many teams off, because there just weren't that many teams that had the personnel to match up with the Miami Heat. And because of what they were able to do with their lineups, it forced a lot of great coaches to make decisions that they end up regretting. A good example of this is the 2013 Conference Finals against the Indiana Pacers, when in overtime, LeBron had a wide open lane for an easy layup for a game winner, simply because the spacing that was on the floor was so prevalent that it forced the Indiana Pacers with Frank Vogel, who in my opinion is still a great coach, to take out Roy Hibbert as rim protection due to the fact that you had both Chris Bosh and Shane Battier on the floor at the same time. Another example is the iconic Ray Allen shot. Many people question why Popovich had Tim Duncan on the bench, and it's simply because Tim Duncan was being abused in pick and roll actions, and quite frankly, he just wasn't laterally quick enough to stay in front of LeBron. And with all that being said, I will leave you on this note. One of the biggest problems that I have with the NBA community, especially when it comes to making these videos trying to explain how important certain players were on certain teams, is that many people just go back and look at the box score to try to figure out their impact on the game. But the reality is this: a lot of times you just have to watch the games. You have to understand the impact, the rotations, the adjustments that both teams made to understand how impactful certain players and coaches are for both teams. And when it comes to the Miami Heat during this time, LeBron, Wade, they were great, astonishing, and they had moments of excellence that are just unheard of. However, those moments may not have ever happened unless Erik Spoelstra was willing to try other lineups and allow spacing to take over their offense, which allowed LeBron, D Wade, and other players to penetrate in the lane without any resistance. And because of those adjustments, many teams in the NBA just were not ready for those type of lineups, which gave them an advantage that allowed them to go on to win 2 championships in 4 finals appearances. And so, since no one wants to say it, I will. Thank you to Chris Bosh for making a significant change in your game, evolving the NBA to where we are right now, because if I'm not mistaken, and I could possibly be wrong, however, I believe that Chris Bosh is the first player who started the trend of being a low post to high post player at the power forward and center position, and changing to a face-up game that stretched the floor all the way to the 3-point line. And with that being said, people, I will see you all next time. Peace.
frank, we needed Bosh's guy to help us slow down LeBron. You know, if you just want to simplify it. And, you know, Bosh made shots. You know, a lot of them we were running out at him, and he just made shots.